You read his columns in The Guardian. He is also the author of best-selling books. Owen Jones, political commentator. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24. As we're speaking, we're talking about two contenders. Let's enter a third, just in the last minutes. UK lawmaker Josh Simons giving up his parliamentary seat in Greater Manchester, paving the way for the mayor of that city, Andy Burnham, to join the leadership race. At this point in time, first off, what's your reaction on what's been a busy Thursday?
Well, the country is in political turmoil. I think that's a reasonable point to first make. Wes Streeting, the health secretary, the torchbearer of the Blairite flame, it's very clear that he didn't have the number of MPs that were requisite to stand. He resigned from the government. Yesterday, there was basically an attempted coup by him, and many of his followers, his supporters, or a few of them at least, ministers resigned. But what's clear now, and this is just breaking news, is a Labour MP called Josh Simons, who represents a seat in Makerfield, a northern seat. He is resigning in order to allow Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, to stand as a candidate in order to then stand in a leadership contest to remove Keir Starmer. Now, there is some risk in this, I should say, because Makerfield is a seat where Nigel Farage's Reform Party did well in the 2024 election. In fact, back then, they won nearly a third of the vote. Labour got 45%. Since then, Reform's support has only gone up and Labour support has plummeted. The hope of Andy Burnham and his supporters is clearly that, firstly, he has a unique level of popularity that other Labour politicians don't have. He's the most popular Labour politician and frontline politician in the country, and therefore he'll be able to win the by-election in a way that another Labour candidate just wouldn't. If there was a by-election there, normally Labour, in these circumstances, would lose it badly. And the other is that the Greens aren't in strong contention there, because the danger for someone returning to Parliament is either, in the last case, the by-election where he was Gorton and Denton in Greater Manchester, where Andy Burnham wanted to stand last time, the Green Party won it, but even so, they could divide the vote and stop him from returning. It's a gamble. It's not definite that Andy Burnham will win this, and the most, well,
even though there are fresh corruption allegations against Nigel Farage.
It's tragic, you know, that that scandal has not cut through at all amongst his supporters. That you're referring there to the £5 million donation from a crypto billionaire. Look, a normal politician in normal times, that would sink them. That would destroy their career. But unfortunately, amongst the core demographic who support Nigel Farage, that has not cut through at all. And it hasn't become the scandal that it should have been. And, you know, this is a guy, Nigel Farage, who's making an absolute packet with multiple jobs, you know, whilst portraying himself as the kind of populist man of the people. It hasn't, unfortunately. Reform in the local elections last week did well. They didn't do as well as last year, so I think there's some optimism there for those of us who oppose reform. But they're still in a much stronger position than Labour, whose support now is at historic low levels. Their support in this country is in such a state of collapse that some Labour MPs have started to openly question whether the Labour Party will survive as a political force in this country. That's why people are rallying behind Andy Burnham.
And you could replace the words Labour and Green Party by Conservatives and Reform UK, right?
To a degree. What's happened in British politics is a large chunk of the Conservative vote has gone over to Reform. And it's quite striking, actually, that the Keir Starmer project was based on trying to attract Reform and Conservative voters. But actually, not that many Labour voters have, as we saw in the local elections last week, it was only 5% of Labour voters went to Reform. The Green Party is what the Labour Party at the moment is facing as the real challenge. It lost massive amounts of support in urban English communities like London, like Manchester, where the Green Party topped the popular vote, Newcastle, Sheffield. And the other existential crisis for Labour is Wales. I mean, Welsh Labour was the most successful electoral party on earth. They won every single election since 1922. In last week, nearly wiped out as a political force, the left-wing nationalists, Welsh nationalists, Plaid Cymru won. So the hope Labour have with Andy Burnham is that Labour MPs who support him, is he would win back the support that's been lost to the Green Party, and he'd be better positioned to win support from some reform kind of leaning voters.
Because you've put aside West Streeting. So the hope is that Andy Burnham can cast a wider net than Angela Rayner can. Angela Rayner, who's got this, she's a traditional Labourite who's from a working class background. Andy Burnham, you're saying, though, can perhaps cast a wider net?
Yes, Angela Rayner grew up literally around the corner from me. Yeah, the problem with Angela Rayner, she had what was actually not a scandal, as it turned out, over the payment of tax, which just got resolved today, and she was absolved on that. That was hanging over her. But there were big doubts over Angela Rayner from what we call the soft left faction of the Parliamentary Labour Party. These are people who think this has not been a progressive government, that Keir Starmer's a disaster, and they want a more transformative economic offer. But they've got doubts over her ability as a leader, if I'm just being brutally honest with you. Andy Burnham is someone who's tried to be Labour leader twice before, by the way, and lost. He's someone who's gone on a journey, because he used to be a very hardcore Blairite, really. And he's gone on a political journey. He's had a kind of a solid progressive record as mayor in Greater Manchester, promoted public ownership of buses and so on. But in some ways, there are some risks here, because his political journey's been erratic. The best case scenario for Labour is he is Britain's Pedro Sanchez. That's the Spanish Prime Minister, of course, who has managed to, in a different electoral reality, form a coalition with forces to his left, and actually had a progressive record in government. That's what Andy Burnham would have to do. The question is, are people projecting onto him because Labour is in such a terrible mess, that leader is so discredited, and there's such a lack of obvious leaders in the Parliamentary Labour Party?
Oh, and we're running short on time, so just one quick final question. We heard in the King's speech, written by the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, a pivot towards Europe. How does that fly with voters, and how will it fly with whoever takes over from Starmer?
There is broad support, if you look at the polling, towards pivoting towards Europe. But the question is, what does that mean in practice? Because Labour ruled out the single market and the customs union, and the trade-offs you'd have to actually make, they're not willing to do. So the question is, what does that mean beyond rhetoric? And there's the question of the culture war that Brexit was in this country. But in reality, actually, if they're going to bet the house on winning over people from Reform who are very pro-Brexit, that's not worked out well for them. It makes sense to pivot towards Europe. But the question is, what does that mean in substance? And that's not actually been defined at all.
Owen Jones, so many thanks for speaking with us from London.
No worries, thanks for having me.
Stay with us, there's more to come, more news. And in business, we'll be taking a look at how Cuba's reeling from that U.S. blockade.